Hello and welcome back to the iStorm channel, where we are currently running a 16-part video podcast series on the topic of violence against women in conjunction with 16 Days of Activism, and we are raising funding for Safe Spaces Now.
Public spaces need to be safe and inclusive for all now. A report by UN Women UK reveals how common sexual harassment is in the UK. 97% of women my age said they had experienced harassment. Your ideas to support us have already started making a change. At music festivals, with taxi companies, on public transport, in organisations and in online spaces. It's time for a change. Please support Safe Spaces Now by donating to the cause or get involved. You can find the link next to this video. Thank you.
So thank you so much for joining us today. I am so delighted to have two people with me today for our topic, the topic being non-physical abuse. So with me, I've got Georgia THEODOULOU and I've got JESS LEIGH. So thank you very much for joining me and taking the time for this.
Thank you very much. Really excited to be here.
Really excited to see what this conversation brings up.
So we have the topic of non-physical abuse today, and we've actually done another recording of coercion and control, which is similar, but we have different insights today. So I think this is going to be equally, of course, important and really interesting topics to talk about within this area. And of course, it's all part of the general topic of abuse. And we want to step forward and talk about this and create more awareness to protect women and girls. So I'm going to start with you, Georgia. Would you mind just saying a bit more about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Georgia THEODOULOU. I am a teacher and a campaigner and an activist. So I teach a range of different ages in Wales. And then I also work for Our Streets Now, and I'm sure Jess will do a much better job of explaining Our Streets Now and all of our work in more detail. But we are a grassroots intersectional campaign and organisation working across the UK to tackle and ultimately end public sexual harassment. So within Our Streets Now, I work on the education team with Jess. I'm also the strategy and policy lead in Wales. And then I'm also currently co-founding our soon-to-be-launched sports branch. And then I also work freelance as well as a consultant for schools and organisations across England and Wales on all things kind of violence against women and girls, gender equality, but focusing specifically within the fields of education and sport.
And we also need to mention that, Georgia, you have just won an award. You won the UN Women UK's Safe Space Champion Award a couple of weeks ago. Congratulations.
Yeah, not that long ago at all. I don't think it's still not quite sunk in. But yes, it's downstairs on the mantelpiece, taking pride of place. But yeah, really, really kind of honoured to have had that. But like I kind of said at the day, I feel like it's an award that I definitely share with everyone at Our Streets Now, because, yeah, I definitely couldn't do the work that we're doing in Wales without the support of everyone there.
Collectively, it is how we can create change.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. And JESS LEIGH.
Hello, yeah, so my name is JESS LEIGH. I'm a freelance activist and educator. So I work freelance for a range of different charities that kind of cross mental health, period equality, gender-based violence, and I often go into schools and talk to young people about physical abuse, non-physical abuse, and over the years I've very much heard it all from young people. But I joined Our Streets Now just over 3.5 years ago now, and I co-founded our schools programme with a friend of mine. And it's gone from, a very small team to now lots and lots of us. I'm going to introduce Our Streets Now here, but feel free to move it wherever. So Our Streets Now was originally a campaign set up about 4.5 years ago with the aim of ending public sexual harassment through the law. So currently, like in UK law, or as it stood 4 years ago, the thing that might be known as street harassment to many listeners was legal. There was no law saying that catcalling, wolf whistling, all of that stuff was illegal, and it was wrong. It was very much just passed off as an everyday part of growing up. And so we had two sisters found the campaign, and it grew very quickly. Over the years, we reached nearly 500,000 signatures on our petition to make it illegal. We then grew an Instagram following of 20, 30, 40, and now it's over 50,000. And I think what's really special about R3s now is that it's unlike any organisation in the fact that we all started as volunteers. We all started, even now I do nearly all of this work for free because it's important. And we started that all of us were kind of under 25, under 21. And I think, if anything, it shows that in the UK, non-physical abuse, street harassment happens on an everyday basis for girls, for women, for marginalised genders. And so this campaign was set up, and we joined and grew our volunteer team base to kind of to end that, and to make sure that no girl, no woman, no person has to ever experience that kind of abuse. But the backstory is really cool, and I'm sure we'll go into it a bit more later as well.
Oh my goodness, the work you do is fantastic, both of you. Thank you so much. That's great to hear. We're going to hear a bit more about that, but thank you on behalf of all of us for running these campaigns and doing the work you do. So we're going to talk about non-physical abuse. That's our topic today. And I would just like to start asking you, Georgia, if you could please explain what non-physical abuse means, because of course we know more about abuse as a crime and the consequences of that, and a lot of people don't quite get why non-physical abuse is so damaging. So let's hear a bit more from you what it means.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, most people kind of hear the words abuse or think of an abusive relationship and automatically go straight to physical abuse, because that's kind of seems to be what's spoken about the most. It's most of what we see in the media and things is that type of abuse. But, I think, as Jess has already said, all sorts of abuse is linked. And I think rarely abuse starts off as being physical abuse, particularly if it's within the context of a intimate or romantic relationship. So non-physical abuse, I mean, I think can take multiple different forms. As you mentioned, you've got coercion and control. You can have your emotional, psychological abuse. There's now financial abuse, which has only recently become, recognizable as an actual form of abuse. But I think it's a really kind of tricky and complex one to talk about, and to probably even like coherently explain, to be honest, because, how do you explain or define something like emotional or psychological abuse? Because that will look very different to different people. It will feel very different to different people. And I think the lines between it becoming abuse can be quite grey. And I therefore think it's something that, particularly if you're within that, it can be quite difficult to recognize and see it for what it is. So I think having these conversations is great and really useful. And I know for me, it's something that I would have loved to have had around as I was growing up, then kind of entering my first sort of relationship. Because, when does it stop becoming, I don't know, bad behavior or a bad day or mental health problems, and then become that, psychological, non-physical abuse? And I think there's still so much shame and stigma attached to it. And I know, personally, you do kind of feel like unless it is physical abuse, can you really call it abuse? Can you label it an abusive relationship? It's really, really, really tricky. So yeah, that's a very long-winded and probably not super straightforward answer. But yeah, I think it's really difficult and tricky. But I think it's also really important just to say that, abuse is abuse, and just because it's not physical doesn't mean that it's not problematic and traumatic and wrong fundamentally.
I think you did very well on a very complex topic, but let's hear from Jess as well.
Very, very similar. I think often in mainstream media, the cases you hear, the big cases in newspaper, are physical abuse. I would struggle to name a famous or popular case to do with non-physical abuse or emotional abuse, and I work in the sector. And that's a rubbish place to be at, because it is so much more socially acceptable for kind of non-physical abuse to take place. And also it makes me worry, you know, if as we heard from Georgia, like financial abuse only got recognised pretty recently, what other forms of emotional abuse are we missing out on that we just don't realise are happening in between people? And there will be things, and just because we don't know of it individually doesn't mean it's not happening. So I think for me, like specifically when I talk to young people, I often say non-physical abuse is things like I talk to a lot of kids who go online a lot, and I've heard harrowing stories from I wouldn't even call them relationships, online encounters they've had from strangers over the internet. We can talk about incel culture and voluntary celibate culture and what that means and how abusive that can be. We can talk about grooming. I think it's a really, really wide umbrella. And, you know, me and Georgia, none of us are lawyers. And I think if you were to ask anybody in the sector what non-physical abuse meant, we talk about the different definition because it's very much shaped by the work we do and the young people or people we see. But again, I really want to like hammer down that just because there's no bruises, there's no marks that you can see as evidence, does not mean that it's any less wrong. We're not saying, you know, oh, violence, physical violence is worse than mental violence. We're not pitting these against each other. We're kind of fighting for each other, because as soon as we start going, oh, what's worse, are you worse off than me, we lose the battle in the first place. So I think it's very much understanding that all of this comes from themes about objectification, entitlement, power, and just kind of look, context basically.
Yeah, if the bruises of the mental health could show, it would be a difference, wouldn't it? So, Georgia, in terms of if we're looking at UK right now and as a criminal offence, how prevalent is this? Do the statistic reflect, do you think, what it's like at the moment? What can we tell?
So I think the figures that were released last year for domestic abuse instances that were reported, I think it was 2.4 million adults last year. And I think 1.7 million of them were women. And I think across England and Wales last year, there was 1.5 million reported incidents of domestic abuse. So I think what's interesting there, and what I think I would like to really hammer home, is kind of what you alluded to there, but that second question is it reflective of the reality? And I think absolutely not. You know, we know, and everyone talks about it, there's a plethora of different reasons why people don't come forward with reporting abuse. So I think, you know, 1.5 million reported incidents across England and Wales is horrendous enough as it is, but they're only the ones that are being reported. And I think, you know, if we're talking about that, like I kind of mentioned earlier, that idea of non-physical abuse, I think then that becomes even probably more prevalent, because I think there's likely to be a lot of people who are experiencing non-physical abuse that perhaps don't realise that they're experiencing non-physical abuse, because as we've just kind of figured out, it can be quite difficult to define. And therefore, when you're kind of in it or experiencing it, you know, you might not realise. And I also think that there's definitely an air of, if it's not physical abuse, I probably shouldn't report it, or I can't report it, or I don't know where to go or what to do about it, because, you know, like Jess said, everything that we kind of are exposed to in the media and the police statistics and everything is all more focused on that element of physical abuse. So, you know, yes, the statistics are awful, but no, I think they're absolutely not reflective of it. And I think that probably speaks to a wider issue of this idea of non-physical abuse, and actually how can we be better reporting and supporting victims and survivors of it? How are we actually ever going to tackle a problem when I think right now we have no grasp on how bad the problem actually is?
So I'd very, very much agree. I think I picked up on a few things there. Firstly, that if you think about that figure that Georgia just said, and you think about how many people in relationships that you know, you can probably like figure out that one person that you know will be going through some sort of domestic abuse. I think as well we have to think about why people aren't reporting it, and the reasons are massive. If we look at the state of sexual violence in the UK, different studies will tell you different things, but the amount that get prosecuted is shockingly low, horrifyingly low. That often, I wrote a paper last year around this idea of the second rape. So when victims or survivors go and they talk about their experiences, both of physical abuse and non-physical abuse, the courts, the police, the crown system, the laws treat them really badly, and you have to retell your story again and again and again, and that is really traumatic. So I think there is a lot of distrust in the police. We looked last year to Sarah Everard. We look to kind of history, how the police have treated women and marginalized people specifically. There's loads of distrust. So I think those stats only tell us the kind of the tip of the iceberg, and we should be scared because it's happening so much more than we realize. I think as well, like when we think of abuse, we often think of abuse between two people who know each other in a couple, in a marriage, whatever it may be, or between mother and son or whatever it is. Actually, what we talk about specifically at our streets now is this thing called public sexual harassment, so street harassment. And a lot of that is non-physical abuse. It's a random man shouting obscene things, horrific sexual things to girls as young as 7, 8, 9 years old. Over the years, we've collated kind of, I think it was a database of thousands of testimonies from, had a mum send in a testimony about her daughter, who was, I think, 8 or 9 at the time, that this man just shouted horrible sexual things that I don't want to repeat on here because it's awful. And UN Women UK did a study, I think it was about 2 years ago now, that said 97% of women have experienced some form of sexual harassment. And there's so many more studies. Plymouth National UK in 2021 released a study that said a third of schoolgirls in their school uniform had been harassed. So a third, very clearly underage, very clearly, there's no excuse of, oh, I thought, she wanted or whatever. No excuse. So I think, if you ask any of the volunteers, all 100 of us at Our Streets Now, why we joined Our Streets Now, it's probably because most of us experienced either non-physical or physical abuse. I remember when I was, I think I must have been 11 or 12, walking home from the train station, and this van of men pulled up behind me and shouted horrible things. And I genuinely thought I was going to die. Like at that point, I thought this is it. It was a quiet road. And then even I think it was about a year ago, walking to uni, I had a car pull in, block my path, and I was like, okay, like I'm going to be kidnapped. Luckily, there was a woman who helped me kind of out the situation, but I would class that as non-physical abuse, because abuse doesn't have to happen, I don't think, more than one time for it to be abusive. As girls, as women, as marginalized genders, we experience this kind of sexual harassment on a weekly, monthly, sometimes daily basis, and that's a problem. So I think for me, it's, we're not talking about just those in marriages or in relationships. We're talking about girls, we're talking about children who are just trying to live their life, and their parents often have no idea about it, because unless you're told something is wrong, you just accept it as kind of a normal part of growing up in the UK.
It's a cause and effect, isn't it? And the effect it can have on a very young woman, and of course also in a relationship over a longer period of time. And I think it's so important what we've mentioned here several times, that non-physical abuse is the first step potentially to physical abuse as well. So, Georgia, do you mind telling us a little bit more about what you've sort of experienced or seen in your, through work and experience, about non-physical abuse and the impact it can have?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think as a big part of the work that we do as Our Streets Now, and like Jess said earlier, we've got quite a big social media following, and we're really lucky actually that our followers are super open and interactive with us. So we'll quite often put out on our social media channels, asking for experiences and testimonies. And like Jess said, some of the stuff we get back is harrowing, to say the least. But every time, I probably shouldn't still be being shocked by it, you know, being in this field and having grown up as a woman, I probably shouldn't, but yet every time I am. And I think all the, you know, the reports and stuff that come out, you know, especially I think at the minute, there's lots more information coming out, and lots more conversations around sort of sports exercising this time of year, because it gets dark so much quicker. And, you know, I was doing a bit of research for another interview a couple of days ago, and I think there's a Runners World did a report in 2021, and 60% of women and girls have been harassed whilst out running. And over half of women and girls have to basically change our day-to-day lives to try and avoid that intimidation, that harassment, that potential, you know, abuse, be that, you know, cutting our workouts short at the gym because there's some guy staring at us or walking too close to us. And I know that happened to me. Or, you know, changing our route. Or I know now when it's so dark, if I've had a really busy day working and studying, sometimes I'll just go, actually, I'm just not going to exercise today because it's too dark for me to go out on my own. Too late, I'm too tired to go to the gym. And, you know, that I think is case in point. One of the major impacts is that women, girls, and people of marginalized genders, we literally have to change how we go about our day-to-day lives. And something as simple and as basic as being able to go for a walk, we're left now feeling like actually we can't do that without potentially being scared, or like Jess said earlier, you know, feeling like, oh God, this is it. Am I about to be taken? Am I about to be, you know, kidnapped? Am I about to be abused? Like, that's definitely a thought that I've had. And I kind of was brave the other day and like, I need to go for a walk because it'd been a tough day at work and it was dark, and I went for a walk, and I did cut it short because every time a car went past me, I could feel myself just physically tense up, and I was like, oh, do you know what? Enough is enough. And I turned around and I went home. And then I think, you know, like I said, growing up as a woman, I would be lying if I said I hadn't come across partners or people that have been physically and non-physically abusive towards me. And also, you know, there's a lot of women in my life that have also experienced it too. And I think the really sad thing is that we're probably quite hard pushed if you've not been through it yourself. I don't think we have to look very far to find a woman or a girl or a person of a marginalized gender who has been through it. And I think another thing within our work of Our Streets Now is, like we said, we are intersectional, and we try to be as diverse and inclusive as possible. And I think we can't have these conversations without mentioning the intersectionality of it. And I think abuse, non-physical abuse, harassment, intimidation, physical abuse looks very different for, say, a middle-class, straight, white woman than it does for someone who is not white, or who is disabled or neurodiverse, or who is maybe a refugee, an asylum seeker, non-English speaking. And I think, you know, the studies and the research and the testimonies that we've had from different groups of marginalized people as part of our outreach work as well, kind of really hammers that point home too, that, you know, if you do belong to one or more marginalized or oppressed group within society, the statistics rise alarmingly high, and your experiences are even worse. And, you know, I think I've been not lucky with my experiences, but lucky that I, you know, look, I guess, the way that I do and have the life that I have, that things that I've been through, I've been able to access support and help, and I've had people around me, but that's not the case for everyone. And I think that's definitely something moving forward that I would love to see other people and organizations and conversations kind of include a bit more.
Yes, what's the damage that you see?
Oh, so much. Yeah, I think for me, like, there is so many points there. I know, like, specifically when I give keynotes, the question I often ask is, raise your hand if you've ever taken precautions to reduce the risk of you being harassed. And nearly every single time, every single woman or femme presenting people put their hand up, and the men in the room look around and are shocked. And it never fails to amuse me, because some men just don't realise. You know, we're told to carry our keys in our hand, to send my location to a friend, to pretend to be on the phone, not wear headphones, but wear headphones just once, not get to talk to you. And the biggest thing I always tell people is that harassment lives in people, not paved stones. That, at the end of the day, is not going to stop somebody harassing somebody else. If anything, I'm saying, no, don't harass me. I've taken precautions, harass the other girl. Because often people who want to cause abuse or violence will do it, and they'll find a way to do it. I think for me, going into schools, I see such a detrimental impact on young people specifically. There was a study done by the Young Women's Trust that found that young women who experience sexism are 5 times more likely to have depression. And that is one of the only studies, really. There is a huge lack of research in academia, in charities, around the impact specifically of street harassment. Physical abuse, domestic violence, there is a growing number of articles and studies on that. However, things like street harassment, it tends to be kind of the last thing people think about. So I wrote my dissertation on it last year, did a really big study, and it was so much worse than even I could have imagined. We found out that those who've experienced harassment are more likely to self-harm, specifically if you're queer, much more likely to have suicidal thoughts. And again, kind of the more marginalization you have, not only the more that you experience street harassment, but also the worse the effects of it. And we know it's because it intertwines with racism, with misogyny, homophobia, all these things intertwine. And I go into schools and I talk to these young girls who average like year 9 to 13, 14, and they have the most horrific stories of non-physical abuse. And when they say them out loud and they say, no, I've never told anybody that before. Remember this one girl, must have been about year 9, just burst into tears because she just realised that what that man did to her was wrong. And no one had ever told her that that's not okay. What's also really scary is some boys' attitudes in schools, thinking that it's okay. I've heard some of the most horrific things come from 14-year-olds' mouths. And that's really hard, because I think a lot of people, if you ask people, are we equal in the UK? Have we reached equality? They'll go, yes. And they'll be like, yes, we've done it. We've reached it. When in reality, you talk to young people, specifically around non-physical abuse, where the lines are murky for them, and you realise, gosh, we have a very long way to go. But for anyone listening, I would really encourage you to think about, or cast your eye back to if you've ever been harassed, or your kids or aunties, whatever it may be. And often we get there's a feeling of fear, of inadequacy, of disgust, of grossness, of embarrassment, of shame. And that impacts us. It changes our behaviour. We pay for Ubers home or taxis home instead of walking. We say no to opportunities because we're scared. And that's exhausting. It's really exhausting. So I hope over the years there'll be more research. But for now, we know it has a detrimental effect. And we know that it's impacting girls' and women's lives on a daily basis.
I think as well, sorry, just to jump in on a couple of points, Jess, you were saying there, the research that you did for your dissertation. So I'm in a couple of days submitting the first assignment for my master's in psychology. And this first one I've kind of been writing and researching on was about elite female athletes and their participation in sport, and the sort of psychological gender differences and why that might be. And in all of the research I did, and I say all because there's very little out there, first and foremost. But yeah, some of the findings were, just to echo what you were saying, that female athletes, sort of from grassroots up to elite, much higher percentages of depression, anxiety, really low self-esteem. Like, females are consistently ranking themselves lower on things like their confidence and their, control. And I had a 3,000-word essay to write, and essentially my conclusion has been, I don't really know why, because there is no research out there, there's not enough studies being done. But then consistently what we are seeing is the detrimental impact and effects of all of this on mental health, on body confidence, like you said, self-harm and all of that. And then also to add to what you were saying about schools, and, I think as a teacher, kind of in all the schools I've worked in, speaking to students, of any and all marginalized groups, and hearing what happens to them is honestly horrendous. And I think I could probably do a whole podcast episode on school culture and misogyny and what that looks like. But also in, you know, a previous school, I was sexually harassed and have been sexually harassed by male students, by pupils of mine. And I think it speaks to, Jess, what you were saying about this idea of sort of power and entitlement. You know, I had 13, 14-year-old boys making comments, very like sexual, crude, grossly inappropriate comments about me in the middle of a class, over emails, you know, on social media, because they felt like they could, and they could. So I think, yeah, it just speaks to this whole culture that we have at the minute. And I think entitlement is a really good word, I think, to kind of sum it up, is that we are still, unfortunately, raising generations of boys and young men who think that this behavior is okay. And, you know, you've got 13, 14-year-old boys making comments like that, then you do have to beg the question, where is that going to go? Like, what are they going to grow up into if nothing is done?
Yeah, and just again to quickly add is that we would never put the blame on 13 and 14-year-old boys alone. No one is born making crude comments, inappropriate comments. Often we talk with kids around like this iceberg structure, so this continuum of violence that, you know, the movies we consume, the TikToks we watch, the social media, the porn people find online, like that all feeds into a culture, and a culture that is inherently violent, a culture that says that women's bodies are to be objectified, they're to be looked at, that girls are to be passive and good girls and all of that stuff. Like, this is a culture that spans so much more than kind of one term. It's, you know, it's so much more. It's around the movies, the images we see, the things we teach in schools. Like, again, I could do a whole episode on kind of cultures of consent and where this comes from, but we learn this behavior. This behavior is learned, and therefore we can unlearn it and we can prevent it. And that, to me, like is really crucial.
Thank you so much. I mean, this is absolutely horrendous. And also when you see this is 14-year-olds harassing an adult, the teacher, and how incredibly difficult it must have been for you, Georgia, to manage that, and the prevalence out there. And let's look a little bit more at how young people and adults can start spotting a pattern. So from catcalling in the street, which a lot of men probably would think, oh, but it's just, you know, it's encouraging and it's a compliment, to in a relationship where it's becoming a pattern that could potentially lead to physical abuse and have really, really dangerous effects. Georgia, do you want to tell us something about how do we spot this kind of pattern?
I think it's really difficult, particularly if you are looking at it within like an intimate or romantic relationship, because I think with all the will in the world, once you're in that, once you care for someone that deeply, it can be difficult to be subjective. And then also on the flip side, you know, if you have maybe people in your life who are maybe raising that little red flag for you and trying to get you to maybe see it, it's sometimes near impossible, again, for that subjectivity. I think what I would say, and looking back at younger me, what I maybe wish I had done, is to trust my instinct and my gut a bit more. I think if it feels wrong, if it feels like it's not right, then 9 times out of 10, it's probably because it is wrong and it's not right. And I think I personally tend to do quite well with validation from other people. So I remember, you know, when I've had conversations with friends about behaviors, incidents within a relationship, and they've gone, oh, Georgia, hang on a second, like, that's not okay, that's not right. That has kind of been a bit of a light bulb penny drop moment for me. Doesn't mean that I've got up there and then and gone, aha, eureka, I'm gone, and left the relationship or done something about it, because as we know, that's not how it works. But that was also really helpful. So I think, you know, if we're looking at perhaps giving any advice to any listeners who suspect that they might be in a relationship that is currently non-physical abuse but potentially abusive, would be to trust your gut, trust your instinct, and then find that source of validation. Again, you know, I was quite lucky. I've always had people in my life who I can turn to and have those conversations with, but some people might not have that. And I guess that's where I would say, you know, reach out to those organizations, those charities like Refuge, local Women's Aid, or maybe more smaller local charities. But then again, sometimes that's easier said than done. I think, like we've said, the societal cultural attitudes towards non-physical abuse sometimes might make them, then, you know, I would never have thought, oh, I'm just going to pick up the phone to Refuge because, you know, they're called the women's domestic abuse charity, and, you know, it's not domestic abuse. So I think, you know, with all the will in the world, I can sit here and tell people that they should do these things, but I just think it's so very complicated and complex. But just to know that, you know, there are people, there is support out there, even if it's just a quick Google search. If you suspect that this behavior might be unhealthy or toxic or abusive, then, you know, get that information from somewhere else if you're not sure. And then, you know, whatever the next step is for that individual person will look quite different. But yeah, so I think, and as well, I think this is why it's great that I think there is some sort of cultural shift happening at the minute. You know, we are having these conversations, we are a lot more open about these things, certainly than when I was kind of a young teenager. And I think that, you know, that's great. I think there are definitely steps that are being taken to reduce some of that stigma and that shame that, like Jess, you were talking about earlier. Still a long way to go. But yeah, it is improving slightly. But
it
yeah,
is definitely improving. I mean, I'm probably double your age. And when I started out working as a young 20-year-old, of course, there were men who just thought they had the right to do and say anything. And it was absolutely shocking. And you just had to go along with it because that was the culture. It was very, very difficult to stop someone or say something because you're doing a job, you have your work and you want to be promoted, and all of that reflects in the whole Me Too movement and everything. I've been very, very fortunate not to have been abused, especially not physically abused, but oh my God, the harassment throughout my life, of course, like many, many other women, still ongoing. It's can be quite hard as well. And something I think is really important is not to just leave it to women who might be facing any type of abuse, but for all of us to step forward and say to women, I'm an ally, I'm here, talk to me in confidence if you ever want to talk, because often that's what we need. We need one person, especially a young person who might experience this in their family and can't talk to their nearest family or the teachers, or as you say, you go online and you find domestic abuse and it might not feel like you classify as that, and you don't want to call a big organization like that. It feels massive. So do become mentors, allies, champions for young women as well, all of us, so that they feel that they have someone. And it's just a matter of saying that. If you have friends with daughters, your own, you know, environment and people, young people in your environment, wherever you are, say you can always call on me in confidence if you need to talk. Yes.
Yeah, for me, the biggest thing here is that silence often breeds more violence, and in silence is where fear lives. And we have to keep having these conversations. Often when it comes to like domestic abuse, specifically non-physical violence, people push you away because that's part of the nature of an emotional abusive relationship. And I'm not saying go running back to them, drag them away. That's going to make things worse, but just keep checking in. Even if, you know, say a young person, you know they've been abused non-physically, and they're pushing you away and pushing you away and pushing you away. Just keep checking in. Maybe once a week, send them an email saying thinking of you. Keep offering them a coffee. Keep offering them support, because one day they probably will take it. So I think it's knowing that, and also like very simple things. There is bystander training available for free online on lots of different websites. There are videos you can watch. And if you see someone being harassed on the street, being shouted at, grabbed, groped, whatever it is, step in, say stop, check in with the victim or the survivor, check they're okay. But I think the biggest thing from this is for those who've gone through it, it can feel like it's too late. It's not, but it's a really big thing to get out of a relationship that's abusive. When charities and helplines we know are stretched, and there isn't enough money there. What would be great if it never happened in the first place. And people often say, Jess, that's so unrealistic in this world. Like, abuse will always happen. And I say, will it? Will it really? I really don't think it will. I just don't think, I don't want to believe that's our future reality. I really hope that we can leave this world a better place than we started it. And to do that, we need everybody to have these conversations over the dinner table, in schools, write to your governors in your schools, write to your MP, like just talk about it. Because the more we talk about it, the more we learn. And the more we learn, kind of the better we become at solving this eventually.
Absolutely. This is a really small example, but it just sprung to mind a memory from a long time ago. I was at a nightclub, and there was this guy who was with two other guys and a woman, and he started pouring beer into her top, into her bra. And when I saw it and I saw the look of her face, and I just said, what the hell are you doing? And he backed off and he said, I'm just joking. It's funny. It was just a joke. I said, it does not look like she thinks it's funny. And then, oh, sorry. And they backed off. And then a while later, the woman came up to me and she said, thank you so much, because that was so awful. And this is just a tiny little example in the middle of a nightclub. But that's kind of where the mentality starts, to think that it's okay to do something like that. And then to transfer that to children and to carry on towards women with that mentality. We're going to need to round this call off. I know that we could talk all day about this. There's so many angles of it as well, but this has been so useful, and thank you for all the work you do. I just wanted to check, we need to share links to organizations and all the everything we've talked about here, but can you tell me what how people can get in touch with you? I'm going to start with you, Jess, on the screen. If people want to connect with you and the organization you work for, please, where do they go?
Definitely. So we are at Our Streets Now on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. I also talk about my life as an activist, educator, facilitator in this work on my Instagram at Jess J Leigh, JESSSJLEIGH Leigh. Same on Twitter, and you can find me on LinkedIn, and my emails are linked and everything. But yeah, the more of us in this movement, the better.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And Georgia?
Yeah, same. So the general Our Streets Now social media, and then to my Twitter, I talk about lots of this and a lot more kind of sport focused things at the minute. So that's G_THEODOULOU, so THEODOULOU, and then over on LinkedIn as well.
We are going to share the links under this video in the text, so you can find it and just click. And Georgia, the sports era is huge, and I feel that's a topic of its own, like all the other ones. But that's, as you say, it's not talked about a lot. Being Swedish, it's been actually quite a big thing there, because one of the big Swedish sports stars stepped forward, a man talking about how he was sexually abused by the trainer when he was younger, and that has spread and become a very big movement. And they've taken action in all forms. So it is possible to create change. We are doing it, but we can only do it collectively. Together we can create change, and what you are doing is fantastic. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for viewing. Please follow the links and connect, and also share the videos so we can share it with people who might need it. And we will be back tomorrow with a new video. So thank you for watching. Please don't forget to donate to Safe Spaces Now. Thank you, and bye-bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Don't forget to donate to Safe Spaces Now, link next to the video.